Good morning, Deputy Mayor, Councillors, CEO and Directors. The traditional custodians of the land on which we are privileged to meet, the Yuwi people, represent a human link dating back over 2,000 generations as part of one of the oldest living cultures on the planet. We pay our respects to the traditional custodian elders, past and present, and recognise their continuing connection to our land and our community. So, councillors, as you know, this meeting of the council is being broadcast and streamed live, recorded and published in accordance with the council's standing orders. Unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we still can't have public in attendance at our council meetings, but we welcome our online viewers through our Facebook live stream and our YouTube channel. So, I declare open this meeting today of the Mackay Regional Council for the 13th of May. And to kick off our proceedings today, welcome Captain Lydia Stevens from Salvation Army to lead us in prayer.
Shall we pray together? Father God, in these uncertain times, I ask for clarity. I ask for your peace to be in this place, in this community, Lord, as decisions and things are discussed that affect many people, Lord. I ask for very considered opinions and very considered measures and actions to be taken. I thank you, Lord, for those that are here and encourage them to continue working towards bettering this community together. I thank you for the work that has taken place and for the work that will continue throughout these trying times. In all things, I thank you, Lord, and I thank you for the privilege of being a part of this community. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Captain Stevens, and good luck with the Red Shield appeal this month. Right, so let's kick off, councillors. There's nobody absent on council business, no apologies. Are there any condolences? No condolences. Conflicts of interest to declare? No conflicts of interest. Let's move on then. The confirmation of the minutes of the 29th of April. The ordinary meeting of council. Would somebody like to move that the minutes be signed as a true and correct record? Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Green. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried. Thank you. There was no business arising out of those previous minutes that we've been advised of. We don't have a Merrill minute to table today. So let's move on to the consideration of committee reports and recommendations. The first at 10.1 is the Local Disaster Management Group LDMG minutes of the 27th of April. Pretty well straightforward. Any questions around that? Would somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor Jones moves. Councillor Englert seconds. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's great to see that in the minutes there's over 300 people in Mackay that have volunteered for our care army. And the volunteers, as you know, in our community are very valued and are responsible for many services within our community and activities throughout the region, like sporting clubs, disability services, aged care and charities. And you know, the fact that the community are actually putting up even more so their hand to help us out in this challenging times. But then I guess our community's always been really good at sticking together. So the fact that this pandemic is here and we have another challenge faced before us, our community and our nation, I think we've all done an excellent job. And I'd just like to put a shout out to anybody that knows of an organisation that actually needs any type of volunteers to help let us know who they are and what we can help with. But in particular, I'd like to say thank you to our volunteers for looking out for our community. On another note, in these minutes, I also see that, we all know that our schools are starting to open again, and I also would like to remind parents to stay in contact with their child's school for the most up-to-date information, and a reminder that our teachers have also been our frontline workers and should be respected and thanked for the work that they've done in keeping our schools temporarily open for our essential workers. It's great to see every effort that's made by our schools to do what they can in these challenging times. Even examples of being able to print out documents to help children with their learning processes if they're struggling with technology. it certainly helps a child in their process to be able to continue their education. So I just thank the opportunity to be able to speak to these minutes, Your Worship, and thank our care army and all of our essential workers.
Thanks. Councillor Jones. Speaker against? Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thanks very much. So the correspondence and officers' reports to be considered for this meeting. 11.1.1 is the Office of the Mayor and CEO monthly report. CEO.
Good morning, councillors. Thank you, Your Worship. Very pleasing across the whole organisation. There's no LTIs or major injuries incidents in April. There continues to be a number of minor incidents that we're still working through. Our lost time injury frequency rate remains steady at 3.4, but there's still a fair bit of work to be done. Obviously, April was significantly affected by COVID-19, as you all know, so a very unusual month for us. However, most of our services were maintained through that period, and it's pleasing to say that we had no major interruptions to those key services, even though we're operating completely different than we have done before, so it's a credit that all those key services were maintained. We are now starting to focus on the easing restrictions from next week, so I'm sure there'll be some further announcements this coming week around the opening of our libraries and pools under restricted times and some conditions, but it's great to see that will be coming and something we'll be working on. We'll talk about it in the March reforecast later in the agenda, but we are now estimating a small deficit, which has changed from a small surplus as a planned, and it will say the last quarter of this year, something we could never have been envisaged when COVID-19 came, but we'll talk about that at the March reforecast. And most of our capital works, there has been some projects affected by COVID-19, which we're working through. A lot haven't. Something like the Rotary Lookout, unfortunately, is going to be delayed as a result of other external stakeholders not being able to do what they'd normally do due to COVID. So thank you.
Thanks, CEO. Questions for the CEO? No questions for the CEO. Somebody like to move the report? Councillor May moves, seconded by Councillor England. Councillor May.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just a couple of highlights there. I think the great work that the CEO and the directors have done in trying to maintain our service levels and our services throughout this pandemic has been absolutely outstanding. And we are now faced with the challenge of reopening some of those facilities and services that I know that the CEO and his team have been working on how we're going to action that and keep everybody safe while doing that. I think a really important part of this report this month is around the safety, and it's great to see the monthly action plans and the being 100% across all directorates is just absolutely fantastic. So the inspections also was 100% across all directorates. So I think that in itself is fantastic that we have, through this trying time, still maintaining our safety as a very important part of our business. The other thing that I wanted to highlight was in the Greater Whitsunday Council of Mayors and the appointment of Mayor Andrew Wilcox as the new chair of the Council of Mayors. So I think it was fantastic that all three mayors in our region got elected unopposed, and it's great to see that Andrew will be representing our region on the LGAQ. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor May. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura. Speaking for.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just in relation to the note on the monsoon trough repairs from the February 2018 event. And look, I'm pleased to see that Stafford's Road, the work will be completed in early June. And this is another example of our ageing causeway infrastructure and the risk we face if we allow our assets to depreciate to failure point. Again, I say we must look at allocating funds in this area and set a course towards an assessment of our causeways and identifying those that are in the high risk category. But apart from that, I agree, good report. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bonaventura. Councillor Bella, speaking for.
Yeah, I'd just like to make note of something that some may not have seen, but the alternative use of crushed glass in our unsealed roads being trialled. As some might be aware, we had quite a stockpile there at one stage due to the changes with what we do with our recycled material and China sword. It's brilliant to see that we have been exploring alternative uses, and I think this is just another step on the way. I'd be very, very pleased to be updated if and when there's any major progress on this. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bella. Councillor Jones, speaking for.
Thank you, Worship. Look, the overview provided today by the CEO, I believe, deserves another mention, being that we are one of the largest organisations and employers in the region. Certainly my thanks goes to the CEO and the entire staff maintaining our key services during COVID-19. It's certainly a testimony to the staff that over the past month there's been no major issues, all complaints received, while not only looking out for our community but making sure the needs of our staff are met. It's also pleasing to see that we've had no new cases over the past 4 weeks, and that there are no active cases currently in the Mackay region. I know that council collectively, mayors, councillors and CEO and staff are all focused to provide as much relief as possible as we prepare for our 2021 budget, which will certainly be like no other ever experienced due to our pandemic that we're currently having in our region. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on. 11.1.2 is the Resource Centre of Excellence. It's a lease document. Now, previously this was an agreed lease with RIN, you might recall, reading the document. The Council could see no reason not to change to a specific company set up by RIN to actually operate the facility, and so that's what this document is all about. Some might question whether we had to rescind something before because there was a motion of council, but the lease has not been enacted, so nothing has been enacted on that previous motion. We can't see any reason why we couldn't change it in this particular motion. Any questions?
Just one, Your Worship. Yeah, just in relation to fencing of the property, at whose cost is fencing, and about maintenance of the fencing as well. So it's an external fence that bounds both properties, so just an answer, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bonventura. Yeah, the fence is a part of the capital project, so of the $7.5 million, which is the budget, we think we're going to come under that. 3.6 was state funded, as you know. The rest was the balance. So we're putting two different standards of fence. One fence along the drain side may be just a standard fence. We're going to have something that's a little bit higher quality front facing. And there's also electric gate going in that's card entry from a security point of view as well. That's all part of the capital project. So funding would be half us and half state, if you like. So it's a capital asset that we will own that will be incorporated in that plan and that whole site. Under the lease, minor maintenance would be to the leasee, and then if there's any major capital going forward, like anything else on that building, it will be to our account.
Right. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Further questions? Further questions? Would somebody like to move then this report's adoption, the lease? Second. Councillor May moves. Councillor Englert seconds. Councillor May? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to the 11.1.3, the delegation of authority, appointment of members of boards, advisory committees, etc. Are there any questions associated with this? Somebody like to move the adoption? Councillor Jones moves, seconded by Councillor Mann, I'm sorry. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, in moving this motion, I fully understand that the list that we were provided with needed to be completed and agreed upon as soon as possible to ensure that the groups and the committees can continue with representation from council. But I was extremely disappointed that the direction to fairly spread the workload was not considered. There were approximately 87 councillor spots available on various groups and committees, and I would have thought that picking 8 positions that are in our areas of interest would have been a fairer distribution to allow others to be given the same opportunity. But unfortunately, it ended up being a free-for-all, and we do have councillors on as high as 18 committees and others on 3, not through any fault of their own, and a range in between, which to me is not a fair representation of the workload. Thank you.
That was speaking for the motion?
Yes.
Thank you. I should have said right at the start there were 4 changes to this, and I think everybody got the 4 changes, and so that's included in the document that we're actually considering right now at 11.1.3. A speaker against? Any other speakers?
I'd just like to speak for.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'd just like to speak for the motion that I suppose drawing councillors' attention to the way in which this was disseminated to councillors. It was a blank page that any councillor could volunteer and put their name against whatever committee that they would like to represent council on. It's entirely up to each individual councillor whether they want to be on 20 committees or 3 committees or whatever in between. So I think it's a little unfair to be saying that this is not being dealt with in an open and honest manner. I think that everybody's had equal opportunity to put forward their name, and it's absolutely fantastic that as council we represent the community in 80-odd different committees that touch a whole range of different services, a whole range of different not-for-profit organisations, and I think it's a great thing that council does to be representing and being that conduit between a lot of those committees and council.
Thank you. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura. Speaking for?
Yes, Your Worship. And I agree with Councillor May. You know, to have councillors represented in so many areas is a very, very good thing. Just in relation to a document received late yesterday in relation to councillors' positions on possible strategy groups, I just think there could be a little bit of misalignment, and I can understand where Councillor Jones could be coming from in that area. But look, we are where we are. Happy to go with this, Your Worship, but I do foreshadow that we may need to do some adjustments, which I'm sure council members would be quite happy to do as we go along.
Do it any time. So other speakers? Councillor Bella, speaking for.
I recognise the need for this to be sorted out. However, I have some misgivings, both with this and with the strategic allocations, if they go ahead, in that I believe, to a certain extent, I'm a big believer in looking before you leap, and I think that probably an outline, especially for the newer councillors, as to the purpose, aims and framework under which these committees and strategies, it would have been good if that was provided prior to the allocation of committees themselves. So maybe it's just a consideration for the future.
Thanks, Councillor Bauer. Any other speakers? I'll put Councillor Angler. Speaking. Are you speaking for or against?
Yes. Look, Your Worship, as you know, I've been very critical of the way we've appointed councillors in the last term, as to those who putting up their hand first, getting the role, and I was happy to see that Your Worship put out a list of opportunities for councillors. Now, this is a democracy, it's also a meritocracy, and we as an organisation want the best people in the roles so that we can act the duties that we're responsible for in this region. And I must say, I was surprised to hear the word disappointed used when we were all given the opportunity to participate in this. There was a discussion amongst us all of us adult councillors decided amongst us. Now, if someone's on 3 committees, that's because they only wanted to be on 3 committees. I'm on 7, and I missed out. There are winners and losers in this. I missed out on some things that I'm passionate about. But it's a fine line between, yes, we have new councillors who have experienced some areas through given opportunities, and we have other councillors here for their 2nd term, 3rd term, who are actually really good at some things, and we know historically can represent us in those. So we all backed each other for different positions on these committees. I'm flabbergasted as to why there's a problem with this, and as for the strategic thing, yeah, it came after that, but that's an irrelevant discussion in this one. This is about these committees, not about the strategy. Let's have a councillor adult conversation about that when it's time to have that. I support the motion as it is. I thought it was a very good way of doing it, and as for someone who was disappointed about the way we did it last time, I've got no problem with this time.
Thank you very much, Councillor. You exercising. Are there any other speakers who want to exercise the right of reply? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Your Worship, as I said, I am more than happy to move this motion to have these committees up and running because of the fact that they are needed so that we can conduct our business with these groups throughout the community. The word disappointed was really based on the fact that when we received the initial list that we received, I too went through and went tick, 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 tick to look at the committees that I would be interested on. But when I realised that there was only 87, that really meant in a fair, equitable way that we should all be on around 8 or 9 committees. The 15 that I had ticked, I realised that morning that probably wasn't fair and equitable on my part to be able to sit on all of those committees. Hence the reason when we went around the room, I said, I'll drop off that, I'll drop off that. And I did that deliberately to be able to give other people the opportunity to be able to have that fair and equitable right to be able to sit on 8 committees if they chose. Unfortunately, it wasn't I guess, everybody else in the room would have the same thinking as myself in giving that opportunity to others. And so therefore, even some of our new councillors, while they too had opted to put in their hand for 8 or 10 committees, they too ended up dropping off, but felt, I guess, that maybe others should be on those committees. In saying that though, I don't believe that the end result was fair and equitable, and that, you know, certainly some of our new councillors may have wanted that opportunity, but felt being that that was their first meeting and they really didn't know what things were happening, that they decided it was probably okay for them to drop off. But in actual fact, they really wanted to be on possibly 8 committees. So that's my remarks in closing, Your Worship, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Councillors, you also know that the delegation to change committees at any one stage is rests with the CEO and myself, so it's a fluid document. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against?
I'm not sure.
The motion is carried unanimously. Right, let's move on. Thank you. 7.2 is the Capital Works Program and the review report for April 2020. CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Great to see again no major incidents or issues for the month in regards to safety in this directorate. You'll notice that we've spent around $80 million at the end of April for the year. The March reforecast, which I talked about before, will come up shortly. You'll notice there's some carryover requests of about 12 million. We can go through those then. Just to put into context, in total we have 663 projects in 1920. Of those, there's 227 that we've allocated to design or business case development, which is for future years, which is part of the program of getting ahead of the game for those future years, which leaves 436 projects to be constructed. About half of those are now complete. The other half have started in construction. So even though there might be some carryovers, it's about timing of cash flow and when they're spent, not that they haven't been started. And it's great to see major projects like Queen's Park, nearly 9 million, Ron Searle Drive, 3.6, Resource Centre of Excellence, 7.5, and Tourism Kiosk. They are all on track to be completed by the end of June. So they'll be great to be finished.
Thanks, CEO. Questions for the CEO? Councillor Bonaventura.
Your Worship, I just noticed in page 44, under the capital spend, the 5 top variances, just on the Ron Searle Drive shared pathway there, I know the underspend on Ron Searle Drive relates to delays in piling and retaining wall construction. My question is, will this affect construction timing, or is there enough scope to be able to keep it on schedule?
CEO.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bonaventura. Still, the contractor is saying we're on schedule to finish before the 30th of June. Obviously, if the weather's okay, I think you've probably driven down there recently. It's there's some parts of it are complete already. It's just more around the bridges and those other areas which have had a bit of a delay from the wet weather and some piling issues, as you know, during March, a little bit of April. But if the weather stays favourable, they're continuing to say it's all okay.
Very good. Fingers crossed.
Further questions? No further questions? Yes, Councillor Bonaventura, another one.
Yeah, I've got 2 more, Your Worship.
Right.
Page 53, just on Queen's Park. I note the construction shows only 30% complete to the end of April. And we've got 2 months to the end of June from there. Are you still confident completion of the project? And I know I did ask that last week, but to see the 30% there struck me and I went, oh, that worries me.
Mm-hmm. Question, CEO.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yep, we remain confident. The director's offered to cut his hair if it's not done on time, which should be a major event. Yeah, no, look, we continue with the contractor and everything else. As long as the weather's favourable, I think you know infrastructure pretty well. You get in there and see the car park, it just needs to be asphalted. We have had some issues with asphalting. There's a lot of competition with the ring road at the moment. We are seeing that impacting timing, even on projects that we've slopped in, timing and on some tenders as well. But look, we're still quite confident that all the below ground that took us quite a while is done. I drove past yesterday, the entry area and the major infrastructure is in terms of pathways and infrastructure. So a lot of plants and that sort of stuff, that should be pretty quick. So we're still pretty confident.
Okay.
And the further question?
The further question is similar, Your Worship, on page 55 in relation to the Morani liquid stream upgrade. Again, the project overview shows a separable portion 2 with a start date of July 19 and a finish date of July 20. But it also shows in the percentage completed a 0. So we're not far from July, really. Could I get some explanation on what this covers? And again, are we on track with this?
CEO.
I've got the answer that I'll get the director. It is very complex, and we have got just a claim come in from the contractor about time, so I'll get the director.
Director.
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you.
I will add for the Queen's Park, 30% was actually just an error in the percentages, so it is closer to about 70% of the spend of that project that's complete. The percentage on the liquid stream, it's a little bit complex because separable portion 2 relates to how we switch over from liquid stream to a solid stream at a particular point in time in the process. So July 19 is when the work started, but that separable portion 2 effectively hasn't started yet. It's a process-based switchover, if you like, from the old system to the new. That's why it shows a 0. So we should have really adjusted one of those. It's a little bit complex about how the separable portion 1 relates to separable portion 2. So technically the work has started. It is in progress. Separable portion 2 is a process switchover that happens very short. So it's really not 0% in a way, but it's actually related to process, not physical works.
I think, Director, the intent there was, so how close will we come to July 2020 as a completion date?
Yeah, so overall the project is a little bit behind, as the CEO alluded to. We've had delayed claims and some other claims just come in from the contractor, which we're starting to go through now. It'll be quite a while before we're through all that process. But they are, at their last report, told us they're about 2 months behind overall on the project.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bonaventura. Any further questions? Somebody like to move the report's adoption? Somebody? Councillor Anglet moves, seconded by Councillor Green. Councillor Anglet.
Thank you, Your Worship. As the CEO stated, total spend is 3.8 million below year-to-date forecast because of capital works will and are being impacted by COVID-19, resulting in some delays to completion, which will result in carryover into the next financial year. But I just wanted to bring up 2 points. As mentioned, the Mackay Tourism Kiosk, which ultimately has cost us a little bit of money to get established, but over a period of 10 years will pay for itself and actually bring cost savings to the ratepayers through our contributions to Mackay Tourism. And of course, the Ronsell Drive shared footpath, I drive past this, Your Worship, almost every day. And I've got to say, I'm impressed as to it is extensively more than what I thought it would be. The planning and execution of this project is very complicated, and you know, as to the way that they've implemented, I just got to say I'm impressed with the way that they've gone about it, overcome the engineering issues, as well as making sure that there's little to no environmental impact in that as well. And I think the people are really going to love this and be astounded by what has actually gone into it.
Thank you very much. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura speaking for?
Yes, Your Worship. Just quickly, happy to second the motion. It is in a very good position. But just ask the CEO and the Director to keep focused on those couple of projects and to do the best they can to ensure we get them through on time or as close to as possible. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Community and Client Services report for the month of April. CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is of all our directorates. It's been most significantly impacted by COVID-19 in April, as you would know. Great to see this has a very fine record of safety performance, which is a credit to the Director and staff, but I would like to make a mention that there's a lot of people in this directorate from the MECC and others who have been doing different duties than they would normally do as a result of COVID-19. So they've done that in a safe manner and done a great job in doing that, so it's a credit to everybody. While it's a little bit of an aberration, the budget is highly favourable at the end of April. I can tell you, unfortunately, it won't have the same colour green on it by the end. As you imagine, the next 2 months, revenue from the MECC and everything else is zero. So it is favourable at the moment. It's a timing issue. We don't expect that to be the case when we get to the end of the financial year. I'd just like to make a mention, and I know you've mentioned it before, Your Worship, the work of our emergency management team and other staff who have been involved with the community in the stand-up phase of LDMG during the COVID-19. That's their jobs, but I can say that Council and its staff have really taken an extra step to help out in what is an unusual situation. So I'd just like to pay credit to those people. We did say earlier that we are now working, fortunately, on slowly opening up some of the areas of this directorate that have been closed. We'll get something out this week on that. As part of all that, we've been very, very lucky that the state's going to give us powers to police all the COVID-19 issues in libraries, pools and everything else. So we're very excited, as you could probably tell. And we are working through our local laws and health and reg and how it's going to work. Apparently there's going to be some training as well and how we manage all that. It's going to be an interesting exercise for us. And I would like to also say Anzac Day was significantly impacted this year. I don't think we've ever had anything like it before, but the Court Comms team and the video and the way it was managed, considering the circumstances, did show a great deal of respect for the day.
Yeah. Thanks very much, CEO. Questions for the CEO around this report? Councillor Bonaventura.
Just on page 86, I think it is, no, page 96.
96.
There's a graph on the health and regulatory services. Just in relation to the customer requests, like most things have dropped because of COVID. I just noticed that through April, 734 requests were received compared to sort of 650 for April 19, and you can see the jump on the graph between the previous month and March. Are there any particular reasons stand out for this, Your Worship?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Bonaventura. I might ask the Director to reply.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. There is a couple of reasons for the increase that we've seen, although firstly I would just like to say that the results for April are fairly representative of the range that we typically see month to month. The main reason for the difference between April 2020 and April 2019 is two specific types of requests for overgrown properties and mosquitoes. So the overgrown property request type, the increase in that is a bit difficult to determine exactly, but it's probably relating to people being more at home and reporting neighbouring overgrown properties throughout that period. With regards to the increased number of mosquito customer requests, this was influenced by a spike of requests received from Armstrong Beach. So we had vector control officers investigate those customer requests, and we found that some of the roadside drainage areas around the houses within that area required some maintenance just to reduce the amount of ponding water in that area. So our vector control officers have treated these areas and work with civil operations to address those issues as well.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Councillor Bell.
Your Worship, could I direct a question through you to the CEO? Could you ask the CEO to outline the difference between, in the graph regarding the 0 star and the explanation below it, where we've got a food business suspended and one on notice, which is 2 as opposed to the 1 shown in the graph?
Okay, so CEO, we might refer that to the Director as well. Thank you.
Thank you again, Your Worship. This just relates to what we actually record in the graph primarily. So the data in the graph is the number of full compliance inspections. So that's where we've undertaken a full check of all food safety criteria conducted at that premise. If an officer is simply just following up a business where we've previously conducted an inspection, that's not recorded as a full site inspection in the table, but it is noted as part of their work for that month. So that's why we've noted activity across 2 0-star businesses, but we've only done a full inspection on one of those for the month. That second one, the full inspection, was the month prior, and we've just done some follow-up work this time.
Councillor Bella.
Your Worship, I have a question with regard to the increased hours spent on roadside spraying. I'm led to believe that this is due to increased staffing. Is that staffing been enabled through the reallocation of staff due to the COVID situation, or was it something that was intended from the start?
Okay, so the CEO has handballed this one too, Director?
No problem, thank you, Your Worship. The additional staff hours here was actually due to a vacant role that we've had within the team that's been filled. So it's not a result of COVID-19 reallocation of staff, it is a permanent addition into that team.
Okay, good. Further questions? Somebody like to move the reports? You have a question, Councillor Anglin? Yes.
With regard to the report on SES, I think it's the best report we've seen in some time with the addition of information and some pictures, so we can actually see some of the people we're making decisions for in this place. It's good to see 2 old new members have returned.
You got a question, Councillor?
Yes. But I still have a real concern, Your Worship, around the fact that the report's still stating that that we, if required, we would have a reliance on other units to support us when we know that Isaac volunteers were devastated during the downturn, and that Whitsunday is led by a volunteer group with limited numbers. I bring it up time and again. I'm concerned about
Councillor, you need to ask the question.
I
question at time is concise.
I need some information around what is our actual capability to defend our communities in times of emergency and disaster.
Right, okay. CEO, are we able to answer that here, or
No.
will we get that?
So that would be one of the ones that are on the strategic direction group to understand assets and number of groups and everything else we've been working through that we haven't had that.
So can we circulate a response?
Yes.
Councillor? That's probably the best way we can do that, because it's a fairly large question to answer at this stage.
Yes, Your Worship. It is the same question I've been asking for several years.
All right. Thank you. Further questions? Somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor Jones moves. Councillor Mann seconds. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to make a couple of comments throughout the Community and Client Services report. Page 66 was pleasing to see that Valley District Youth Council Facebook has received over 2,000 interactions, and it was great to see that our staff have been supporting the youth of Mackay through video conferencing and the use of council connecting Mackay resources. Page 67, it's also to see that the first time ever the staff ran their interagency meeting online, and it was very successful with an outcome of over 14 organisations and 20 individuals attending through the Microsoft Teams opportunities, through their online stuff. Sorry. Page 69, when we get into our libraries are still providing the services via online applications, and offered 14 programs throughout the month of April. So it was great to see that our mums and bubs were still able to attend the baby bounce, the toddler time and story time. Even though it was online, it was great to see that was offered to them. Under corporate communications, around website visits, page 85, while all other websites for council are seeing much lower than normal usage due to obviously the closure of facilities as a result of COVID-19, it was great to see that our community are still interacting with council on the Mackay Regional Council website, and the numbers of the visit for the month of April was 46,188. On page 87, Your Worship, in the month of April, it was great to see that our community are interested in seeing how the new council are and what they're up to in the attendance of the live stream, as that's increased compared to previous months. 101, page 101, regulated parking. I'd just like to give a mention to council's COVID-19 community assistance package, where council staff have been able to do some off-street parking fees that were actually removed as of April the 3rd for customers that are using the pay stay system. So hopefully this will lighten the load for a few of our community members that are working and are in the city heart, and that helps them with their parking fees at this time. Yep, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Jones. Speaker against? Are there any other speakers? No other speakers? Councillor Bell. Sorry. Speaking for, obviously.
Your Worship, there are 3 points that I'd like to cover in this, all of which make me very pleased. Vector control, the idea of us not only adopting the short-term fix by going and treating mosquito infestation, but actually looking at the long-term work to stop that occurring through work on our infrastructure. Drainage is I think, the ideal. People need to be aware that we can't do everything at once. It does take time, but I think this is an excellent thing. The increase in staffing on spraying of weeds on roadsides and weed control generally is very pleasing. There is an old adage, which I've stated here before, 1 year seeding, 10 years weeding, is very, very true. I battle with that from my own holdings, and I think where weed increases tend to be exponential and will have an effect not only on agriculture, but also on our environment. And should we see some of the effects of Parthenium that we have seen in other areas, there's a very real impact on the health of our residents. The third thing is the STAR system, which I think for our food vending businesses, I think it's a brilliant system. And to note that 96% of the businesses in our area are actually of a 3-star or greater. 3-star being fully compliant, 4-star and 5 being lots of bells and whistles, I think is absolutely outstanding. To see that we adopt an approach of assisting people to go to the next level, to reach compliance, is great. And I'm very pleased to see we do have the big stick there, because this is not just about the business. This is about the safety of the people that attend those businesses. So my congratulations goes to everyone in that field. It's been a great concept right from the start. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bella. Any other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura speaking for.
Yes, Your Worship. Look, I'll be brief. Just one point I'd like to make, and that's in relation to our libraries. And that is, I noticed that our staff have sent letters to all the volunteers and friends of the libraries. And I think in this time of pandemic, a lot of our volunteers are elderly, they're retired, and a lot of them coming to the library to do their little bit of work is probably their only outing for the day or for the week. So, you know, the fact that we've done that, or that staff have done that, I think that really is a lot of comfort to them, and it says that they've appreciated it, and I appreciate it too, Your Worship. So could I say to the Director, thank you, and continue with the good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bonaventura. Other speakers? Before I put the motion, I'd just like to endorse the CEO's comments around our emergency management team. Although our local disaster management group has gone back to a lean forward situation rather than a stand-up situation, that doesn't change the workload for the EMT. And they are doing a sensational job in our community, and still do. And also the corporate comms team. The corporate comms team, as you know, did a fantastic job for Anzac Day. And I endorse the CEO's comments and compliments to the corporate comms team for what they did for our community in Anzac Day. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on now to 11.4.1, the adoption of council policies. There's 2 council policies for adoption today. Number 96, the legal assistance for councillors, and the councillors' acceptable request guidelines policy, which are up for adoption today. Are there questions? No questions. Somebody like to move then the adoption of these council policies? Councillor Jones moves. Councillor Mann seconds. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. These policies that are before us today are provided to give clear direction to councillors when interacting with staff. Councillors are elected representatives of the community who set the strategic direction for Mackay local government region. This term of council is going to be very different as a result of the Balcarra reform. This policy confirms Mackay Regional Council's commitment to Section 17A of the Local Government Act 2009 as a way in which councillors can interact with the CEO and the staff for advice while undertaking our roles. So I just look forward to further discussion around these policies, and thank you for the opportunity, Your Worship.
Thank you. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Speaking for, Councillor Bella.
Your Worship, I had a number of queries regarding these policies, which I must say the CEO answered quite well. But I do want to raise one particular point in Policy 104, Council Acceptable Request Guidelines. The inclusion of 6.1.5, I think, is a very good inclusion, which covers my queries on that one quite well. In the minefield that Balcarra has created, I had specific concerns about my involvement with staff through a committee situation and the questioning about what goes on in that committee. I think that this particular clause inserted is of very great benefit, and I would like to thank the CEO and his team for inserting it. It will provide clarity and make our functioning a lot easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bella. Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried. Thank you. 11.4.2 is permanent road closures for those plans as I've mentioned out at Balnagowan. Are there questions around this? No questions? Somebody like to move the adoption of the report at 11.4.2? Councillor Bonaventura moves, seconded by Councillor Hassan. Councillor Bonaventura.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, Tiger Moth Road has cane growing through it, and it's been growing cane for quite a long time. And the farmer already has a lease. And I see this as the next step, as we have no need for this unformed road area. Out of interest's sake, I've been in that area over many years. We have a tremendous amount of unformed roads in that area that go zigzag through there. And I have no idea why it would have been designed that way, and I mean well over 100 years ago probably. Your Worship, I'm also interested in to know the history of the name, Tiger Moth Road.
You and me both.
And that might be something we'll have to do some research on, Your Worship. But look, happy to support the officer's recommendation. I think it's going in the right direction.
Thank you. The only explanation I could come up with Councillor, was that there must have been an emergency landing out there a long time ago for it to end up with Tiger Moth Road.
If I may, Your Worship, just at the start of Tiger Moth Road is where the model aircraft airstrip is. So they own that piece right at the beginning of Tiger Moth Road. The only bit we're not closing on Tiger Moth Road is the access to the model airstrip.
Right. Well, there was an accident out there a long time ago. Okay, so are there any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. And 11.4.3, the March 2020 budget review. CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Particularly for the new councillors, these reports have probably been for a couple of years now. They're quite comprehensive when we do a March budget review, where we try to articulate any changes. So I won't go through all of them. There's too many. I'm sure happy to take any questions. I just will say that on the revenue side, we're about 3.6 million down in revenue forecast compared to what we originally thought last reforecast, mainly on the back of COVID-19 impacts around the MECC and a few other revenue streams, but also on the back of waste, which I think I've mentioned before, was down anyway. On the expense side, as a result of that 3.6 million revenue loss, we've had a very close look at our expenses, and we've found $3 million to cut out on the other side to try to minimise the impact. When you add those two up, we've gone from a small surplus to a $455,000 deficit in this reforecast. I've still got some optimism that we can hopefully do better on that, but the next 2 months are very hard to predict with COVID-19, so we'll see how we go. So that's the P&L side. You'll see a lot of changes on the capital on the side, overs, unders, savings, carryover. There's a lot in there. The summary of all that is that there's a carryover of about $12 million into next year. I'll just reiterate that carryover does not mean the project hasn't started, it just means it didn't get completed when we thought it was going to be, so there's a carryover of costs until next year, until we finish. So that brings our total down to about 120 million that we're planning to do next year. Planning to do this year, sorry.
Thank you, CEO. And this is a really good report reflective of some pretty tough times that we're going through at the moment. So congratulations to you and the Corporate Services area for producing this report for our review. Are there questions? Councillor Bonaventura.
Just one, Your Worship. Just at the bottom of page 128, I noticed under cancelled projects or project savings, plant equipment replacement program, and we've saved supposedly 450,000 on plant equipment. So my question is the plant equipment going to be replaced next year? Is it a deferment, or have we just found a way not to replace that at all?
Good question, CEO.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bureau. We're happy to take it offline on specific items of plan because I don't have that information in front of me. But we put on you may recall, we actually put on a fleet coordinator. I was going to say a year ago, but I'll look at the director to see if it's even longer than that, to really focus on solar. We had a workshop coordinator and someone who did the work on this. We thought that spending $8 or $9 million a year on plant equipment replacement warranted someone to have a look around. When's the utilisation of our key plant? When should we lease? When should we buy? When should we replace? So there's still a lot of work to be done, but part of that is what's been part of what you're seeing. So something that we would have said at the start of the year that we thought we needed replacing, we now worked out we can go longer So I wouldn't say for the whole 450,000, we'll come back and happy to give you the detail on that, but it's not just we didn't spend it in time. We can spend a lot of money in this area, I can tell you, but it's about making sure when we spend, it's on the items we need to spend it on, not just because we think it's ready to replace. So there's a lot of work going into that side. I think there's a lot more work to go, but it's a major capital spend with this organisation every year. So we're now trying to get some focus on making sure it's based on solid data and basis for when we replace things without taking any risk on compliance or safety.
Yep. Thank you, Your Worship. That's good.
Thank you. Yeah, good question. Thank you. Are there further questions? Somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor Englert, seconded by Councillor May. Councillor Englert.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to, besides a $45,000 operating deficit in this last quarter, another quarter to go as a result of our lost revenue and some savings in other areas, mainly I just want to reflect your statements, Your Worship, in that, you know, while others might feel the need to engage, you know, the leadership in telling them to not lose focus, I can say that I am, the CEO, Director and staff have been most impressive during this time. I'm absolutely certain that we have one of the best groups of leaders in the same place at the same time at the time we need them most.
Yeah.
So I am completely confident that even though these times are very worrying, we have some of the best people guiding us through it. I'm very pleased with this report. It's not a good for us financially, but I'm absolutely certain that the people working on getting us through this are the right people for the job.
Thank you very much. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor May, speaking for.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I really just want to reiterate what Councillor Englert has said, that you see the comprehensive report that we have in front of us today is no easy feat from a director and the staff being able to put that together to present in a manner where we can draw from it $3.6 million worth of reduction in fees, that revenue that we've got in, roughly $3.1 million that we have managed to save in expenses, which counteracts some of that, to be sitting and hopefully sitting at the 30th of June with a deficit of $455,000 in this day, in this pandemic that we find ourselves in. I think it's an absolute credit to the staff and the CEO and his team.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor May. Any other speakers? Councillor Bella, speaking for.
Yeah. The thing that catches my eye in this are the existing projects. First of all, the overruns, which, looking at them, you know, you've got to expect a certain amount. And when I look, they are things that I think would have been difficult to foresee. But coming further along, when I look at project savings, cancelled project savings, it's very pleasing to see that despite what's going on, we haven't cancelled too many, and we've saved quite a considerable sum of money on quite a few of these projects. One thing that does impress me once again, and it's reflective of a comment I made earlier, one would think common sense is common, but it's not. And to see it displayed probably flies in the face of a lot of critics of council. I note here $10,000 for the MECC convention roof drainage rebuild project brought forward to take advantage of MECC closure. You know, that sort of thing, while it's small, reflects a culture, I believe, and I think it's something, those small things indicate large results down the track. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bella. Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. There's no receipt of petitions today, no tenders to consider, there's no consideration of notified motions. We don't have any public participation, of course, today. Late business. Councillor May.
Thank you very much, Worship. I really just wanted to draw Council's attention to that next week is Volunteers Week, and we would normally be having our expo of arranging over at the senior citizens, or we did it down at the showgrounds last year, where we gather all of the community-based organisations, give them an opportunity to promote themselves and to gather in new volunteers. Unfortunately, that won't be happening this year. So I just really wanted to draw our attention to that particular week next week, and also to the community to draw their attention to it, and say a big thank you to the 314 people in our regional council area that registered their name for the Care Army. I think that's an absolutely fantastic achievement for our regional council area, and we thank each and every one of those people for putting their hand up. The council volunteers themselves, we have over 430 volunteers that are associated with council facilities and programs. To each and every one of them, we say thank you very much for giving your time. We really appreciate it. And I think if you think about the pandemic and the impact that that's had on a lot of not-for-profit organisations in our community, and the volunteers that are associated with those community-based organisations, I say congratulations to them as well. I know that our staff has been checking in with a number of organisations, been checking in with our volunteers. So if you've got a few minutes next week, just sit back and celebrate Volunteers Week, because we can't do it in a fashion that we'd like to, but we certainly do still appreciate the work that's been done.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor May. Anybody else with late business? Councillor Bella.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't wish to be the proverbial wet blanket, but I just raised the point that as we are currently seeing the easing of restrictions, I would like to take this opportunity, and I pray that I'm wrong, but to make people aware of the possibility of a second wave in this virus. There are glimmers in the news just recently in China and in Germany that it is occurring, and over centuries we've seen an increase in medical technology. However, we've seen no change in human behaviour, and we've seen second and third waves way back as far as the Dark Ages, Spanish flu, and it will happen quite possibly in COVID-19. So it's not a matter necessarily about the limitations of the lockdown. I'd just like to draw attention once again to human behaviour and ask people to just be aware that even within the relieving of strictures with stage 2 and stage 3, if we can just make sure it's not whether we've loosened things up or not, it's our behaviour within. We've all seen in supermarkets and things like that people that have just either forgotten or refused to accept the distancing and that sort of thing. One of the things I'd like to suggest is that, as has been suggested time and again, the 1.5, which we've adopted pretty enthusiastically, is inadequate, really, medically, and if we're increasing our amount of liberty, we should really think personally about increasing that personal space, maybe to the 2 metres or a little bit more. And that, once again, is human behaviour, and all I can appeal to is people's better judgment on this. Thank you.
Thanks very much for those words, Councillor Bella. Any other late business? No other late business? There's no confidential reports to consider today, so thank you very much, councillors, and thank you, CEO and directors. I declare the meeting closed.
All right. Are we able to come back at 11:30?
So yeah, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, so 11:30, councillors, is that...
Yeah, that'd be great.
Is that okay? If we start our briefing sessions at around 11:30? Great.